The Macabre World podcast is brought to you by Darker Art Studio, home of real human bone jewelry. Stock and custom pieces are available, so visit us on the web at www.darkerartstudio.com and show them your darker art side. Macabre World, a podcast from Darker Art Studio, where we explore the dark, strange, and unusual from this world and beyond. Hello, and thanks for coming back to the Macabre World podcast. I'm your host, Rocky, and we have Cole Mozelesky from Crooked Teeth Keys, and I like to call him the Bone Collector. Hi, Cole. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And Cole and I are friends and associates. We met at Monster Mania Con.
Yeah.
And also Cole is very helpful to Darker Art Studio in getting us some bones. But human bone collecting, it's a thing. How did you get into it? I'm sure that lots of people are curious. Well, first, before I ask how you got into it, because that is a big interest.
Yeah.
Let's scare them right off the bat. How many human bones do you have in your house?
Like individual bones?
Well, you have
people. How many people?
How many entire people, more or less, do you have in your house?
So entire people, I have 9 or 10-ish. I don't know.
So you're somewhere around the like Mutter Museum level.
Yeah, well, that's just for the full ones, and then skull-wise, I'm in the 50s, maybe 60 now.
And also, you collect taxidermy.
Yeah, I have some taxidermy, keys, Ouija boards. Really into like medical tools.
Oh yeah, medical
like
tools.
Victorian medical tools. Yeah.
Now I'm trying to remember the name of it, and you're probably going to be able to think of the device I'm speaking of. It was for an anti-anxiety for women, and it was an electronic device. That, and I want to say
there was a lot of that going on. There was a lot of things.
It was it was an anti-hysterical stimulator.
Yeah.
And
they had even dilators for that. They had all kinds of stuff.
Basically, back in the day, if you were just like feeling a little too womanly and a little too emotional, they just, sent you to the doctor and he got you tight. He got you all good. Everything good. So yes, Cole is a tremendous collector of many, many wonderful medical and unusual curiosities. When did this start for you?
I was about like 12, and it was actually pretty local. It was a town, New Hope, in Pennsylvania, and there was like a post-mortem shop there, and that was like the first time I really saw anything where it was like, he had skulls there, and he had like post-mortem photography and all this stuff, animal skulls, and I've never really saw any of that in person before until then, and it just kind of surrounded you. And that day I left with like a little squirrel skull and a skeleton key. And that's kind of what kickstarted the whole thing. And then around that same time is when Oddities aired on like the Science Channel. That TV show.
What a cool show. Yes.
Yeah. So I grew up watching that, and it was just kind of like the perfect storm that got me into it all. And I don't know, to me, like bones themselves are like natural sculptures and artwork. And it's just like interesting. Each one's so unique.
They tell a story.
Yeah, they tell a story. You can actually learn about the person once you like really get into it. You can like, see things that you would only know when they were alive, but you can see after death as well.
Injuries.
Yeah.
Some of the sometimes like cause of death or something like blunt force trauma.
Cause of death. If they had
bad teeth.
A lot of times I can see like malnutrition. I can even tell how they were raised. You
can tell who's a tooth grinder too.
Yeah, tooth grinder. Yeah,
it's an angsty person. You're gonna have that tooth. I remember the shop you're speaking of. I want to say it was called Teardrop Memories.
Yeah.
And the gentleman who ran it was a delightful human, and it had a beautiful spot. He was great. I've been in there. He was great.
He had some history I don't want to go into, but he Some hidden history.
And if I'm not mistaken, there is a similar style shop in that location, but it
The
is
Creeper
not
Gallery, yeah.
right. But it is not the same.
No.
The same persons, but it is very similar trade stuff. And there's a few other.
Yes, I'm good friends with them. They're Donna and John. They're both co-running that shop. They're really cool people.
I haven't been in there since it's changed hands, so I'm gonna have to take
Yeah.
a ride and get up there because that's such a neat little town. If anybody's up in New Hope, Pennsylvania, highly recommend. Always something cool to see,
Yep.
and always something cool. So
yeah, they carry my tooth necklaces there too.
Oh, very cool.
Yep.
Before we get too far into it, we're going to repeat it more than once throughout the show. But Cole, please let folks know where they can see your pictures of your collection and do some trade with you if they want to see what you've got going on.
Yeah, so definitely, I mean, the best spot to find me is on my personal Instagram, which is Skeletor_keys. I'm always posting items for sale. I'm posting, snapshots of my collection and just general updates of where I'll be.
And you've got what have you got coming up for shows?
Nothing too much until springtime. I'm waiting to hear back on Laurel Hill.
Same.
The cemetery. Yeah, so I'm waiting for that. And then the day after, I'm doing Trenton Punk Rock Flea Market. I feel like there's something else farther on that's coming up, but I can't put my finger on it. But yeah, there is something. There's an oddies market happening in Adamstown. Don't remember the exact date, but it is coming up in spring.
Oh, that sounds like a pretty busy schedule to start. And so you got interested after, getting exposed to some of this stuff early on, and it is a fascination. And you're a science guy. So, I can see science. Well, I always love what I call the Davinci Personality, the people who've learned how to see art and science as not mutually exclusive, that you're able to kind of find a little bit of art in science and vice versa. Mm-hmm. But your collection is insanely large.
Yeah, I add to it every week. Last week I added the two-headed calf sitting in front of me. You can't see it right now, but
there's pictures on your Instagram. They need to go on your Instagram.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, but I'll show a little bit if you want. But
what was the calf's name? I saw the post.
Biscuits and Gravy.
Biscuits and Gravy, the two-headed calf.
That's the thing. Like even him, I knew about him for several years now, and it was this picker had him for over 25 years, and when I first met him, he said, "Oh yeah, I have it, but it's not going to be for sale, but I'll show it to you." And that was a few years ago, and then finally he's like, "All right, I'll sell it."
Well, you make great relationships in this type of business because we're all kind of an unusual little brethren. Because my thing with bones, and I'm, as folks know who know darker arts know that I'm into that too. My thing with bones is I've always thought that they were the great equalizer. We're all the same underneath. We're all worried about the color of our hair, the size of our waistline. And I'm not saying you shouldn't worry about those things. But when it comes down, the great equalizer is once you strip away everything down to the bone, we are all the same.
Yeah.
Except some people, I think, have better spines than others. But So, you got into it. You started when you were 12, and I assume that it didn't quite reach fever pitch in the next year or so. You worked up to it took many, many years, I assume, to make this collection.
So, I got into it, but I only had a few things. I was the kind of person where, and I still am, where like, and it's cool. Like, it just depends on what kind of collector you are. But I was the kind of collector where I would rather save up my money to buy better things. And I only had, all the way up through college, I had maybe 5 animal skulls and like a couple little knickknacks here and there. And within college, I did buy my first human skull, which is actually right in front of me here. I'll show a little sneak peek.
Oh, fantastic.
But yeah, so this was my first skull I ever bought. And,
folks, you got to go on Instagram because as he's moving the camera, you can see a variety of beasties hanging on the
we're
wall.
Done.
And there's all kinds of cool. So this is like a hanging skeleton, like you'd see in a medical school. Going in there. So I noticed that a lot of now people always I know they ask me this, so I'm going to guarantee they ask you this. Where do you get the bones? and in my case, they're typically retired medical specimens. And I would imagine much the same.
That's generally what they all are. There's that. There's, some of them are from like ones that were just being studied through. Some are from Europe. They're, because Europe has a big history with, a longer history than we do. And, a lot of those bones, they've studied over the years. Doctors have had them, and then they just kind of move around the world,
Well, there's a particularly beautiful vertebra that I got from you that's going to be part of a showcase piece that still had the India ink script on it, labeling it as a C7. And it is a cervical 7. And actually, it was in Roman numerals, and I ended up doing an eyepiece. I'll have to send you a picture of it, of a Roman numeral dragon eye clock on it. Yeah, it's crazy stuff. So, so you get the skulls, and people always seem to think it's strange. What are you trading in human parts? Well, yes. And, but it's not, it's with the exception of in the United States, you cannot ship bones into Georgia or Tennessee. Apparently you can. And
Louisiana.
Well, Louisiana is no way. Don't. And do you know the history of that? I'm going to assume that there's some sort of colorful history to Louisiana that may lend itself to that being a bad
unfortunately,
egg.
It was a bad egg that ruined it for everyone.
Louisiana.
They have a lot of above ground graves and a lot of flooding.
Very much so.
Someone was just like, "Hey, I found these. I'm selling them now."
Well, I've been to. Have you been to New Orleans?
Not yet.
Oh, I highly recommend. It's a delightful place to visit.
Yeah.
One of our future guests is going to be Kalila Smith. She's the head of Haunted History Tours down there.
Nice.
And a dear friend of mine, the only person to get me at 5 a.m. in a canoe going out to a mass grave. That was a really interesting day. Yeah. And but when you go to New Orleans, there is a lot of wonderful cemetery tours, and the history and design of those cemeteries is very interesting. It's natural cremation. They because of the climate, they look like big pizza ovens, and they put them in there in a wood coffin there, and because of the climate, in 366 days, the body cremates naturally, and they just kind of brush them back, because you'd see these like wall oven things, and it would have like 5 names on it, but it's really only the size of a coffin, and I'd say, well, good Lord, how do they get them all in there? Yeah. And that's when they said they just sweep the ashes back into a container called a caveau, which means cave in French. And but they shove them all back in there. Well, maybe shove sounds nasty, but they just push them all back in there. Yeah. But it is you can't trade, but outside of where it's not allowed. And I know there's a handful of countries that are not shipping them out, and some can take them in. But it's very legal.
Yeah,
nobody's breaking the law here.
All the way through the 80s. I mean, you could order it from a catalog. I have some of the catalogs where, it's just a pamphlet, and you could just order them, and the medical companies were still producing them.
Well, there's a point where it's also like cars, because if you look at the price, say, for an entire skeleton, which is, that's gonna run you a few lodge, as we say in Jersey. It's gonna run you a few lodge, even though I'm not from Jersey. But but what in some cases they do is they disarticulate them, and the separate bones and individually priced for folks like me, for folks who are doing things like SAR. And I mean, they actually get more total if they break it up for parts. Yeah.
And that's like, it's a shame, but it's true. It is like a car,
it's very much like dealing.
And now, whenever I get something, like if I see where like it's worth, like if I can repair it, I repair it. If there's certain parts where I'm like, it's kind of too damaged, I'll kind of salvage what I can, keep what I can together. And a lot of times what they used to do was, actually I have one right here. Let's see. Figure out how to turn that around. Like this is a box right here. This one is Adam Ruley. So this was a company in Europe. And, this is from the early 1900s. And you can see the advertising. And this was a half skeleton.
Stars and bars. For those who are,
So, like,
who are
this
listening,
is a whole,
it's just crazy.
Yeah, so this is like a whole half skeleton. So it has one of every bone.
So it's if you can picture it, it's a beautifully done wooden box that's probably smaller than a Foot Locker.
Yeah.
And has mostly someone in it.
Yeah, so like it has like one of everything.
Right.
So like if you were a student and you didn't have enough space for like a full skeleton,
you get a couple lithographs.
You could at least have
you got all the examples. Yeah, that's very cool.
But,
that's a nice.
You didn't have room for one of these guys,
Oh my goodness! It looks like it looks like the catacombs in here. So definitely got to go on and check out it. Also got compliments on all your display cases. They're beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Beautiful. Well done. Well done. I can't imagine amassing a collection like that. Now, what do you get the most requests for? People, is it skulls? Are skulls like the thing, the done thing?
It depends. I mean, bone wise, because I sell all kinds of stuff, but just related to bones, I'd say, I guess, skulls, hands, femurs, and then a lot of like the cheaper end stuff. A lot of people like to do crafts with them, and
I know what you mean.
Good starter piece, yeah.
But the Tibetan necklace that you recently one of Cole's recent things up for is now those were femur heads.
Yeah, I'll show it off real quick. That's in the living room. Let me turn on. I also have the écrochet in here. But yeah, so this is the baboon. And so these are all tops of femurs, like the femur ball. And Tibetan monks would carve these by hand.
Fantastic.
And they would hang them on the doorways, and it would be to keep evil spirits away. And it's really hard to find even just one of these, but someone I know had these in a museum at one point, and he collected them over, I forget how many years he said, and he strung them on a necklace. And this is the most I've seen in one place.
That's incredible. How many are in that?
22.
So if you all can picture, again, go on the Instagram and have a look at it. 22 femur heads. That's your thigh bone, kids. At the top of the femur head is carved. Each one is carved into a skull. And
this is probably one of the rarest things. One of them that I have. So it's a 1700s écrochet.
Oh my!
You can see their fingernail. So this is all real arteries, real heart. It's all been wax injected and coated with arsenic and who knows what else. But this is a whole person from the 1700s.
So for folks who aren't familiar with écrochet,
so that's like a process that, pretty much like what I said, they preserved the arteries. They kind of show the inner workings of the body. Sometimes they're more splayed out than this one. This one's just kind of showing the cardiovascular system, but sometimes they would show even more than that. You can see like the back that still has all the skin.
Wow.
And they lacquered it and everything. I'm almost positive. I'm not completely sure yet. But let me get this. I'm pretty sure it's made by this guy. I'm still looking into it, but
Fragonard.
Yep. Yeah, so he was a famous, what was he?
We call that an artist, an écrochet artist?
Yeah, yep. So he was French, and like he did this piece. He also did this piece. He was like autonomist.
So if folks are looking to learn a little bit more about it, they can look up Fragonard and the Fragonard Museum and catch that online and see some of the examples of this. Truly, I'm reminded of the exhibit that was touring a while back.
The road body exhibit.
Yes, wasn't that incredible?
Yeah, so people like him, like he was directly related to why that was inspired. I mean,
Had to be,
Bernard,
yeah.
he like kind of how mine is, where like the arm is up. He was
Yep.
all about being whimsical. I
Sure.
mean, obviously, you saw the guy riding the horse. Like he was the only person to really
Well, it's
tap
science
into that.
meeting art again. We're back to
Yeah.
science meets art because
So the
it's a
fact
way
that like mine is kind of in a very weird position, like normally it wouldn't be done that way. And that one that I have, I mean, as far as I know, there was only one other one in a private collection in the world. I know some people have like parts of one, or a hand, or like a head, or a foot, or anything like that. But for a full one, I've only seen them in museums.
That's amazing. And I mean,
Yeah,
isn't that many times the case too, that a lot of the larger pieces, be they full skeletons or some of the other, can, meet accidental ends and end up like fractured literally and figuratively, and broken up, or a piece, some of the pieces are delicate and they don't stand the test of time. They get kind of crunched out and damaged. And it's, so where do you start to repair something like that? I mean, that's
I mean,
super glue.
Depends. No, some stuff it depends. I've glued my fair share of skulls. They're pretty.
I was gonna
easy.
say, look, I will admit I have used super glue on bones. I've done it.
Oh yeah, I use Elmer's glue sometimes too. Sometimes Elmer's is the best.
PVA glue, any kind of like Elmer's, and yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah, no, especially for like teeth or anything like that, if they're falling out. But actually, like when I got this écrochet, the arm was actually like this, and I still need to fully repair it. I have it propped up right now, but I still have to work on the proper way to.
So it was supposed to be up and out, stretched, and it was kind of
so
crunched
right now
down.
it is up and out, but if I take it out of the case, it would fall back down. Because right now it's attached by the arteries and the skin, but the bone itself kind of came undone.
Now, do you get any kind of reaction? I assume that anybody who actually comes into your house knows you, assuming that, just like have random strangers jumping in your living. But I mean, like, when the UPS guy comes, does he walk in and take a step back? What's the reaction like when people see your house for the first time?
I've had some people come over that didn't really know what to expect. Actually, I mean, I had a good example where someone recently came to pick up a skull. They came in person and picked up a skull, and they, came with someone else, and they were like looking around, like they were pretty concerned, and they want to get out really quickly. And I'm like,
oh dear,
well, yeah,
that's great. Well, in addition to bones, you have the keys.
Yeah,
and you had mentioned that you started collecting those early on as well. Why keys? Was it because it's skeleton keys, or is it?
No, it just it just happened to also have the skeleton word in it. But I don't know. It was something like I loved how each one had its own like history and story. Each one was like, especially for back then, like it wasn't like today where like everyone's like, oh, I gotta lock it up. I'm leaving for 5 minutes. I gotta lock it up.
Right.
Like back then, it was like you left things open most of the time. You weren't worried about anything. So if you were locking it up, it really meant something. And yeah, just the fact that like each key really did go to something at some point.
It's a misnomer that any skeleton key will open any lock. They are sized and they are.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them can open. I mean, it's not quite an exact science like it is today, but they are able to. They are different.
Yeah.
I have a key story. I can't wait to tell you.
Yeah.
I'm just burning. So difficult to tell, but I live in a house that's from 1851.
Mm-hmm.
And there are skeleton key locks of varying sizes, from everything from like the doors to some of the smaller built-in like hatch windows. Those also had lockable latches with smaller skeleton keys. That's why I know that you can have a few different sizes. Yeah. So prior to getting this house, I lived in an apartment complex in a very sterile place that had been built probably in the 80s. And I'm relatively fastidious. And I walked into the middle of the bedroom, and in the middle of the room, like where the vacuum would go, not like under the bed or someplace into the side, in the middle of the room was a skeleton key. that I had never seen. And I could not figure out where it came from. There was nobody that had been in there. I couldn't think, maybe the maintenance guy. I don't know. There's no place anywhere in a square mile that takes a skeleton key.
Yeah.
Where did this key come from? Could not figure out where this key came from. I'd never seen it. Nobody had been in there. And I vacuumed frequently enough, and this was in a high traffic area. Yeah. So I kind of held on to it, and I was like, that's so strange. Well, we get this house, and all of the doors and all of the small wee doors have their own key, and they left the keys in the doors so that they would stay with their appointment. But there was one door that did not have a key.
And that was it.
It fits this door.
That's awesome.
I don't know where it came from. I don't know how it got there, but it fits the door that is now the studio room for Darker Arts.
That's awesome.
And it was this was miles away from here. In a place where it shouldn't have been. It just sort of showed up. So that's literally
how things happen like that.
It is. Well, keys are huge in symbolism. Very symbolic.
I mean, there's all kinds. I mean, especially when I sell keys, like a lot of people are interested for many different reasons, you know?
Sure. And
a lot of symbolism, a lot of
lucky.
Lucky or creepy. Some people think they're creepy. Some people just like the aesthetic. I don't know.
I don't even think bones are creepy. So you're really not going to creep me out with a key.
I don't think they're creepy, but yeah, some people.
I think it's fair to say, Cole, that our threshold might be a little higher than some people's.
I'm real desensitized, but
I think so too. Well, I mean, have you ever worked in the medical field, or is that just?
No, it's just been a hobby.
Just always been your thing.
No, I went to school for music business.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's just always something I kind of liked, and I kind of like keeping it that way. It's where it's almost like when you make your hobby your job, you don't really like it. So I've always just left my hobby.
I get it.
Even if I do understand. End up, making more doing this than like any job I've ever had, it's still my hobby, you know?
But, now what do you prefer? Bone collector, the bone broker? The Skeletrader.
Yeah. Skeletor.
Well, the Skeletrader. It's like, but in addition to the bones and the keys, you recently posted an interesting acquisition, which was the book.
Which one? The
one that was bound in skin.
Yeah, I have that. Yep.
So what's the history of that type of binding? Like, why? Why does that happen?
It was done recently. The book itself is an anatomy book from the early 1700s. I think it's in French, but it was actually done by a guy who's currently doing it, Jeremy Pauly, and he I ended up sourcing everything and then had him do all the work because he's known for, doing the finished pieces.
Tanned human hide?
Huh?
Tanned human hide.
Yeah.
Now that comes usually from wet specimens, and then which are similarly acquired.
Yeah, just decommissioned, medical specimens. And I ended up getting like a whole chest piece and had bound it into a book.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, isn't there a movement right now where people are saving their tattoos that way for post-mortem curios?
Yeah, it seems to be getting a lot more popular. I'm still seems like it's still iffy on how to actually go about doing it. But I think it's getting more, more relevant as time goes on. It seems like getting more popular.
Well, I mean, the tattoo culture has grown in recent, decades.
Yeah, and it's, we keep going back to it. It's all, part of art. It's another art form.
So if you have books bound in human skin, several baseball teams worth of people with skeletons, that amazing Tibetan piece, and you have so many beautiful pieces. I am almost terrified to ask, what is on your bucket list? What don't you have that you gotta have?
Not much. I mean,
I know. I'm like, what's left?
I mean, if we were to look at the list when I first started collecting, I only have one item left, and it was Lobotomy Tools.
Nice.
Because they're very hard to find, because when they were doing them, they literally were using ice picks for the most part.
I was going to say, I pictured a nice
that would have been
pick
used, like they wasn't specifically for it, so you would never know. But there were some made for the operation. Because I've seen them. I've seen them in like back rooms of museums, and that's the only place I've seen real ones. Other than that, I've never seen one in a collection. But yeah, that, I mean, and then obviously like, maybe more elongated skulls or
does pathology make them more interesting to you?
Yeah.
So like either whether it's something
pathology and operations, but like a shrunken head would be cool, but it's nothing like, I'm not gonna like pay top dollar, it's just something where if I come across it, I come across it. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I don't really, if I just find something for a good price, I'm like, yeah, sure.
Now, where's that the most prevalent? The shrunken head thing? Is that's mostly what, South America, Brazil?
Yeah,
shrunken heads.
Area in the world, yeah.
That's definitely an unusual item. If I'm not mistaken, I think wasn't there some sort of controversy about some of those being like they were manufactured, they were not, and they did for tourist trade.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things. Like I have, the Kapalas where they ornamented the skulls and inscribed on the skulls. Those are all tourist pieces. Same goes for a lot of the shrunken heads. There's, a lot of authentic ones out there, but most of them are tourist ones where, people were coming in and seeing what they were doing and they liked it. So they said, oh, well, we'll sell some to you. And
so it's, there's a lot of stuff out there like that. I have seen people present me with something that they were like, oh, wow, look, I found a finger bone. And I'm like, that's a chicken bone.
Yeah.
Like, how do you know it's a chicken bone? I'm like, well, our ligaments don't set in like that and with their bone pieces. But for folks that may not be as familiar as yourself, and I'd like to think I'm pretty bone savvy. But when folks are saying, I'd love to get into something like this, what would be your advice for somebody who's looking to start a collection or looking to, maybe get into a little bit more of an unusual, to find something that, and it's, let's just go out there, say it right ahead. You're going to pay. I'm sorry, you're going to. If you want a genuine article, and then a real piece, you're entering into something that's going to have a higher value. So would you say the first warning would be if it's too cheap, it ain't right?
Yeah, I mean, I was just about to say, going into it too, like kind of segueing off what you're saying is, there's a lot of scammers out there right now.
Right.
Just last week I saw someone taking my photos and messaging them to people saying, hey, I got this for $1,000 and if you want to buy it, you can pay me now.
Oh my. Yeah, that's
it happens all the time.
Unscrupulous. That's just dastardly.
Yeah, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Unless it's in person, obviously. But yeah, just do your research, see who you're dealing with. I know there's a lot of review groups out there on Facebook, and just do your research. Figure out who you're buying from and what you're buying.
Now, do people ever ask you this? And I occasionally get this question, so I'm curious to your answer. People ever ask you, like, aren't you afraid that all the bones are haunted? and it's no disrespect to the folks that ask the question. It is a question I hear all the time.
I would love for something to be haunted, and I've tried. I've tried to make things haunted, and my building right now is a known haunted building.
How do you try to make something haunted? No, wait, I need to know how you make something haunted.
Well, like I try to contact them. I use Ouija boards. Gotcha, I do whatever. Yeah. And, I literally not knowingly, I didn't move here knowing it was haunted, but like it is one of the most haunted places in my town. And I'm like, oh, like, cool. I didn't know.
And they still leave you alone.
Yeah. I go to the local pizza shop. They said, oh, you see the little girl up there? And I go, huh? I was like, oh, like the landlord's, daughter? No, like the little girl. And I go, no. I was like, no, I haven't seen her around.
So, I've never had an experience.
What I joke around with is I say, I'm the one haunting the place. I'm the haunting. But yeah, no, nothing's haunted. I mean, nothing's ever happened.
It hasn't been my experience with bones. I've had
No.
experiences where I feel like I've been in contact with something that was haunting.
Yeah,
but it's never been connected to anything, like in my collection or anything. And
like when I was younger, like I saw shadow people. So like I've seen some things where I'm not like a total skeptic, and I'm like, I would love for ghosts to be real, but I haven't had any proof yet.
I had an uncle who was very wise. He said, I don't believe in ghosts, but they scare me just the same. My Uncle John. But, there are a lot of people who do feel that you can get attachments and things like that. Yeah, and Ouija boards. I also collect Ouija stuff. Mm-hmm. And I just got a Swami board, a vintage Swami board.
Nice.
Yeah. And my sister found it in a Goodwill in Maine for $25.
Oh.
So that was
I have one right here. This is 1891.
1891, and it's I love that it's behind an arsenic.
Yeah, has the planchette. That was the original planchette. It looked like a little paddle.
The Ouija boards. The thing is I think a lot of folks are just solely familiar with what was. I think Hasbro makes them now. Excuse me. What was the Parker Brothers mass marketed it initially. And I'd love to get my hands on it. I have no idea where it went. If my sister ever finds it, it'd be great. But we had one that was probably purchased in the late 60s. We have one at our house.
Awesome.
Because it was, even with the parlor games and all that kind of thing, because that's how it was marketed.
Yeah.
And everything. And I grew up not far from Parker Brothers, which was in Salem, Massachusetts. But I know that Fold out of Baltimore was the one who kind of, I believe he patented the design, and that eventually went into but spiritualists have been using that type of talking board or some sort of talking board long before Parker Brothers, long before Fold. That's been something of a thing. And have you ever had an experience with a Ouija board that gave you pause?
Yeah, I mean, they work, but it's what does that mean? Does that mean that there was a spirit, or does it mean it worked how it's supposed to, where it's like subconsciously you're getting answers, where a lot of people don't realize how much their subconscious actually is at play, and it shows in that type of game.
So it's almost like a physical manifestation of like neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah.
And and folks are able to.
Yeah, it works, but what does that mean? In what way does it work?
I think one of my friends once said she felt that everyone was telekinetic to some degree, that we all have at least some pension, some ability in that department, but most of us just don't focus on it or anything. And I've often wondered, her statement coupled with what you said is something like, do we kind of make it move ourselves? Is that, because we want to know what it's going to say. And
I believe in that too. Cause I do get that a lot where, I don't know, I'm really good and I can't like make it happen, but like, I'll like think of something and it'll happen. Or like it happened recently where, I don't know, I just have weird luck too, where like I was thinking about a two-headed calf like 2 weeks ago. And 2 weeks after I got one.
So you got a great knack for serendipity. My roommate,
like that's how it happened. It's really bizarre. And or like all the time I'll like message someone randomly, or I'll do something randomly and they're like, oh, like I was just thinking that. And it happens more often than not, which is weird, but I don't know.
I've always thought life is somewhat of a string of coincidences.
Yeah.
it becomes a bit of a string of coincidences. And
There's
I think
something going on.
I've never had a great faith in Ouija boards. I've used them. I've had sometimes where I thought it was pretty much, I thought there was something going on, and I had a fairly recent session that actually seemed very genuine. But my first Ouija board session was in the early 70s with my middle sister, and the Ouija board very quickly, firmly, and confidently, as soon as we sat down to address it, spelled out Rocky stinks. So wow. I'm pretty sure there may have been some sort of untoward untoward forces, but within my sister. So
Yeah.
that might have been my earliest moment of skepticism.
Yeah. Yeah, I have one board too, which is a funny story. My one friend was driving, or he wasn't even driving, he was a passenger, and they were driving along, and he saw one on the side of the road, and he said, "Oh, like stop the car." He went out and grabbed it. It was a board from the 1940s just sitting on the side of the road.
Wow. That's serendipity, all right.
And he's like, "Hey, you want this?" I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll take it."
Still have it?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, nothing's happened.
But yeah, that is, I have to say, that is a very unusual way to acquire a Ouija board.
No, and it was great. He just gifted it to me. He's like, I don't really want it, but you can have it. And I was like, cool, yeah, I'll take it.
Well, she's going to kill me for saying this. My sister had to keep it in the trunk because her partner did not want it in the house. But she knew she had to send it. So until she could get it to the post office, but yeah, somewhere up in Maine, somebody had ditched a Swami board. And I hadn't seen one of those in a long time.
Yeah.
And then that was, so the stuff is out there. I think there's a lot more stuff out there than people realize, because I think a lot more people are collecting.
Yeah, I mean, just last week I was at the market and I found a board from the 60s, but then also it had a planchette, which I have to repair. I'll show you real quick. I need to repair it. It's kind of in pieces right now. But here is the top.
That's a beautiful old Ouija planchette. The pointer is amazing. So my goodness.
So it had the box and everything. And yeah, this was just at the market.
The old fold board.
It's got the date. Yeah, it's from 1919. Can't really see it, but yeah, 1919.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Well, the spiritualist movement in the United States really kind of took hold early in the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
There were clubs. I have a couple of books from the New York Spiritualist Society. There were spiritualist camps. There was one up in Lilydale, New York, and another one in Casadega, Florida, which is outside. Lilydale's up, I think, a little bit closer to like between Buffalo and Rochester, somewhere in upstate. It's way too cold, New York. And the other was in far more temperate Casadega, Florida.
Yeah.
Which is just that's about 30 minutes outside of Orlando. And there were camps, there were movements. People used these boards. People, you practice divination. They practice spiritualism. It became fashionable.
Yeah.
To have such things. And I kind of get that there's like sort of a new agey thing happening now where people, because we used to just be weird.
Yeah.
We may still be weird. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, well, now it's in style.
Right. Suddenly it's in style,
Yeah.
Everybody was like, you're such a freak, but now you get invited to parties. It's funny. I can speak only from my dealings with trading in the human bone art, is that my clientele, I think a lot of people assume that the clientele that would buy that would be people who were only fascinated with all things dark, morbid. I have a ton of people who are academics. Academics love my stuff.
No,
it's very, very big.
Anyone, yeah.
You can't pigeonhole it.
Yeah, I've sold to medical professionals. I've sold to people that just think it's neat. I've sold to people that just are collectors. They like seeing it on the shelf. They like the medical history aspect, like me. And then I have sold to people who are
just weird. That's okay.
No, they're weird. It is for genuine rituals, and I'm like, cool. You do you.
You do you. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
well, I think that's probably why they can't get bones in Louisiana.
Yeah.
I think when you bring the ritual aspect in there, I think
the ritual, but they were getting them in the wrong way.
As well, that is true.
I mean, as long as you're, doing it the right way, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Worldwide, the legal bone trade, as I understand it, is that this is mainly people for whatever reason. Typically, a lot of people, I think, are indigent who do it to defer burial costs, donate their remains to science.
And that's how it was in the when the medical, the bone trade was really, at its peak, and that's kind of how it was going, where it was a lot like more poor areas where they had the option, like, do you want to bury, do you want to cremate? And then it was an option where, do you want to have them donated to, the medical company, and we'll compensate you for it.
And that's always attractive.
Yeah. And, and then there's a lot of people out there. I know, like, even right now, there's a lot of controversy where, they're bringing up the aspect of like, oh, like you're taking advantage of, the poor people and this and that. And it's, it's not really that way at all. Like, they made the choice, when they had the option, and
right.
It's been done.
It's not a forced choice.
Yeah. And, their bones and everything were used for what they needed. And now it's kind of phased out, where now, most doctors use, plastic bones, or, they don't really need the real stuff to study from anymore.
Well,
and
it's
even
amazing.
A time where when you look at like the old catalogs, maybe in the 80s, it was almost at the point there where the plastic ones were as much or more as real ones.
Really?
There was a time, yeah, where if you look in the little pamphlet I have, it's crazy seeing the prices. They were almost the same.
Well, 3D printing is a thing now. I'm holding up my business card holder, which is a lumbar process.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And this was 3D printed from an MRI.
Yep.
And a dear friend of mine,
we have some crazy...
she's a genius. She built the printer and she got an MRI and printed that out. And I said, that's going to be perfect to put my business cards in.
Yeah. And that's like, I'm coming out with some new jewelry right now where I was able to get a cast of some baby bones.
Oh, wow.
And I have them as necklaces on like sterling silver and white bronze.
Yeah, now I can speak from personal experience. Your key rings are amazing. They're lovely.
Yeah, thank you.
Very, very cool. Sterling silver skeleton key rings, easy to fit because it's kind of like wrap around, like similar to the spoon rings, where you can adjust it a bit. And I always get compliments on it. In fact, I discovered it in a post you did because you were holding something, and I was like, dude, I gotta know about that ring. It's gorgeous. Yeah. There's lots of you can't go wrong if you give Cole a visit at his Instagram, and he's going to give you all that information again. You can't go wrong. There's something for everybody, whether you necessarily are looking for a book bound in human skin, or if you are looking for bones, and more bones, a two-headed calf.
Keys, antiques, bottles.
Oh yes, that's right. You have such wonderful bottles. I collect old embalming fluid bottles.
Yeah,
I have several, and you've got lots of cool poison ones.
Oh yeah, I got poison ones. I mean, in the attic right now, I have, antique like Victorian casket stands. I have some embalming machines. I got a little bit of everything.
One of my favorite things is the baskets.
Yeah.
The Undertaker's baskets. Fun fact for the listening audience. When somebody, before, the more modern versions of tools were around, when someone expired and they took them to the Undertaker, they had a 6 foot or so woven wicker basket. And if somebody was not doing very well, then they were a basket case. That's where the expression comes from. There's a lot of those expressions that from cemeteries and funerary, like a dead ringer. Do you know what a dead ringer is?
I could probably guess, but what is it exactly?
Well, usually we use the expression for when someone looks like someone else. Like, you're a dead ringer for so-and-so. Oh my God, he looks just like, such a movie star. He's a dead ringer for him. A dead ringer is back when, of course, it was always a big concern, especially through the turn of the century, that people were going to be buried alive. And it was a real thing. It happened. And right. So they had all kinds of like bizarre, like weird contraptions that would have like a ring with a string on the finger of the deceased that went up through a channel and up to a little bell. And if the deceased should unfortunately wake up inside their casket underground, they could just tug that string and frenetically ring the bell, and there would be somebody who, because during the day people were coming and going, because people hung out in cemeteries because they were beautiful and they enjoyed them like parks. So during the day there were people around, but you had to have a guy overnight listening for that bell, and they call that working the graveyard shift.
Yeah.
That's how the term for illness. And so
Yeah.
imagine, imagine, this poor person has rung the bell and the guy working the graveyard shift here, and they dig him up. And so they're fine. Now here's somebody they know walking down the street who may have gone to their funeral 2 weeks ago, and they turn and see them. And it's somebody they're thinking to themselves, I saw them buried. I saw them dead and buried.
Yeah.
And that's why somebody who looks just like someone is a dead ringer.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of that. Please tell folks once again where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, so definitely, if you want to get in contact, see the collection, see current items for sale, check out my Instagram at Skeletor_keys.
Awesome. And we're going to have that information up on the YouTube channel for the Macabre World podcast from Darker Arts, so that you can see it. Cole, once again, always a pleasure. Friend, associate, and fellow bone freak. I am so glad that you were here and taking time out of your very busy schedule. Looking forward to seeing you at shows coming up. Thanks so much. And thank you all for tuning in. Stay kooky, my friends.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Macabre World. You can find us on the web at www.darkerartsstudio.com.